Good evening. Welcome to our Gita Wisdom with Lakshmi class this evening. Thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join me this evening. As we continue our journey, we should be able to finish the second chapter, a very profound chapter in Bhagavad Gita, full of wisdom. So we should be able to get through it on this Tuesday evening, July 8th. So let us begin. We left off at text 59. So we'll continue with text 60 of chapter 2. But before we begin that, just a little recap, because it's important. This particular section of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is describing the transcendentalist because Arjuna poses many questions to him during the course of their discussion. So one of the questions that Arjuna poses to Krishna right prior to this 60th verse is, what does a spiritual person look like? What does a transcendentalist look like? How does he walk? How does he talk, etc.? And this is one of the key factors about studying Bhagavad Gita. I oftentimes people ask me, what do you do? And I say, I teach the philosophy and psychology of yoga. Now, the philosophy of yoga is contained here in the Bhagavad Gita, what yoga is all about. So it's really leaves no stone unturned. In other words, there's a lot of questions posed by, and even posed by the individual, may be a particular point of clarification needed. And so this Bhagavad Gita deals so much subject matter. Even I think there's something like 703 verses in the Bhagavad Gita. And basically it's been conjectured that it took Krishna approximately an hour and a half to deliver the Bhagavad Gita. So it didn't take him very long. But imagine if you can understand how much knowledge Krishna put into this hour and a half discussion with Arjuna. So one of the first significant questions that Arjuna asks is, what does a person who is advanced spiritually, what do they look like? How do they walk? How do they talk, etc.? What are the characteristics of such a person? So the recap is going to be, let me move things around here. My son inserted a microphone for me. So the recap is going to be what Krishna has given us so far in the previous verses. So just as a rich man has his symptoms, and maybe the car he drives, the clothes he wears, the house he lives in, etc. A diseased person has their symptoms also. A learned man has their symptoms. So this is, what are the symptoms of a spiritually advanced individual? And it's important for us to understand this, because in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the 34th verse, Krishna emphasizes the need to hear Bhagavad Gita from an advanced person. So that is why we need to know what is an advanced person. What are they speaking? It's not that they're charismatic. It's not that they can put on a good show, but rather the wisdom which comes from them, from their mouths, which illuminate our path. There's a verse that we chant in the Bhakti Yoga tradition, which describes this. Om Jnana Timrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jaina Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. So my path may be due to the darkness of ignorance, I cannot see, but due to the presence in my life an illumined soul, a person who is illuminated with knowledge about this, the process of self-realization. That person who themselves is illuminated can illuminate my path so that I can see very clearly. So some of the points that Krishna makes in terms of what is the symptoms of transcendence, top symptom is what do they say? What is their speech like? And also, in addition to that, what it's not only how they speak, it's how they act. Even more importantly, is the example that they give. Are they living? Are they walking the walk, or are they just talking the talk? You can talk the talk, but you also have to walk the walk, which means you have to be living what you are speaking. That's where realization comes. There's jnana, vijnana. So jnana means knowledge, and knowledge is good. Knowledge is important, but vijnana is of utmost importance. And what is the vijnana? Vijnana means realization. That once you put into effect the knowledge, then you begin to realize it. It becomes part of your life, part of your understanding. So, top manifestation is what is going on in the mind, how it manifests through the mouth and through actions. So, what are some of the symptoms that Krishna already talks about in the previous verses? 55, 56, 57, 58, and 59. He mentions, the first thing he mentions is one who gives up gratification of the senses arising from mental concoction. We discussed that a little bit. Gratification, it doesn't mean that we don't experience pleasure. We are pleasure seeking living entities. But if the focus of your action is just to please you, in other words, it's self-centered. In other words, if you are the center of your universe and everything revolves around your needs and your desires, then that is not a characteristic of one who is realized. A characteristic of one who's realized is that they give up that self-centered mindset, and everything is first an offering to the Supreme. Gave the example previously about eating. Eating can be a completely transcendental and transformative experience if it is done in the process of yoga. In other words, if we're able to connect what we are doing, eating, for instance, in yoga, how do we connect it to the Supreme? The way we do that is through meditation, through understanding, through prayer, various chants, various mantras, which actually transcendentalizes the food itself, makes it uh, um, a spiritual substance, which means it's connected to the Supreme by virtue of sacrifice or offering. And I've described to you a little bit about sacrifice in the sense that it is the process of connecting, first offering with gratitude to the Supreme, and then that process, that ritual helps to connect it to the Supreme and thus be spiritualized. So even the process of eating becomes an experience that is cleansing to the heart, cleansing of the mind, and gives us realization about gratitude and how to understand gratitude and experience gratitude. So that's the difference between jnana and vijnana. The talk of it, the definition of it, and the actual experience of it. And I think you all have in the course of your journey in life, I think you've all experienced genuine gratitude. So the genuine gratitude, when you experience, it's an emotional experience. It's a profound experience. It's a transformative experience. And that helps us to actually make the connection and keep the connection. So one who practices yoga becomes yukta, or one who is a connected being. They see everything in relationship as an offering to the Supreme. So that's what is meant by giving up sense gratification. It's giving up the self-centered, I am the center of the universe mindset, and connecting it to the Supreme. So there is, it's not that I don't eat the delicious cooking that my wife does and I don't enjoy that. Oh no, I can't enjoy this, because a symptom of of an advanced spiritualist is no sense gratification. No, the gratification is there, but it's just a flip of the switch in terms of perspective, how you see that process. Even according to Ayurveda, from a health perspective, eating can be done consciously. And when eating is done consciously, it's actually healthier when we eat consciously. In other words, one of the ways to eat consciously is not to talk, not to be busy in the mind, not to be watching TV or fooling around on the internet. None of those things are there. It's a conscious awareness of what I am doing and how it's in service. This spiritual food is in service to the body in terms of maintaining a healthy condition of life. So that's what giving up sense gratification means. And some of the further points that Krishna makes further elucidates that point. Number two, another point that Krishna has made, by performing this yoga process of a connection to the Supreme, it's purifying. It helps us to get beyond the conditioning which causes selfishness. And that purification is kind of like, the comparison can be when you have cataracts. And by the way, I have cataracts, and in a couple of weeks, in a couple 2 months, I'm going to India to have those cataracts removed. But what you see with a blurry perspective. You can see, you're not blind, although it can get to the point of being blind. And also one can get to the point of being totally ignorant of their purpose in life and who they are and what they are. But the removal of the conditioning spirit, in other words, the conditioning which causes us to think that I am the sole enjoyer, and the sole and whole purpose of my life is to enjoy, and everything else is subservient to that principle. So giving up sense gratification means that we are not subservient to that principle, that we act, in the course of our action, we are remembering our connection with the Supreme, and all the gratitude that's there in remembrance of that connection. And then what this does is it actually purifies us, purifies the heart, purifies the mind, purifies the intelligence, so that we can have the consistent ability to see that connection. So that's why Krishna says, when we go through that transformative process, when we are being purified, then the satisfaction that comes from the self alone, in other words, being within the self, not always externalized out, looking at the sense objects and trying to enjoy those sense objects. But when we're able to withdraw, like one of the previous verses says, as a tortoise withdraws its limbs, we're able to do that. We're able to experience this contentment which comes by being situated within the true nature of the self, the spiritual nature. So that happening, we find satisfaction. We experience santosh or contentment. Other symptoms are not being disturbed. There are many reasons for our disturbance, right? We can be disturbed, by many different things. We can be disturbed. There's what's called the three miseries: adi atmika, adi bautika, and adi daivika. These are called the threefold miseries. And there are three categories of how we experience misery. Adi atmika means the misery is coming from the body and the mind, from us within this um, microcosmic universe called the body and the mind. So if our mind is disturbed, if our body is disturbed by ill health and other issues, then that that experience of misery is a disturbance. Our mind is restless. Our mind is agitated by so many different things. So many thoughts are there. So many repetitive thoughts. I just recently read that the mind is capable of thinking anywhere from 60 to 80,000 thoughts per day in a 24-hour period. And the other point that was made, and this is from the psychological world, the other point that was made, of those up to 80,000 thoughts, most of them are repetitive. Maybe 60% of those thoughts are repetitive. So it means that when we get into a mindset that may be negative, a negative dialogue that's going on in our minds, it's played over and over again. So it doesn't just cause us disturbance just when we think of it, because we'll think of it again and again and again. The negativity is also a profound experience. That's why we get accustomed to it. We get comfortable with it because it's a very powerful experience. For instance, anger, very powerful experience. Sadness, very deep and profound experience. These lamentation, all of these things are very profound emotional experiences, responses. So we can play that that recording, that negative mindset over and over and over again, just repeat it again and again. So that's a good example of adi atmika, misery or misery which comes from the mind and misery which comes from the body. If you have a pain in your hip or your knee or your neck, a lot of people nowadays, especially because with cell phones and laptops and iPads and all these devices and many devices, we're looking like this, right? And we're keeping our neck under so much pressure because the head, the skull, is like 8 pounds. It weighs 8 pounds. And if you always are leaning 8 pounds in a certain angle, and it's stressing out the muscle in such a way that it will cause disturbance, pain. So we have neck pains and back pains and shoulder pains and knee pains. So these kinds of miseries, which are coming from adi atmika, or the self, as described, self, atma is the word that's used, and atma can mean mind, atma can mean body, atma can mean soul. So the totality of our existence can fall under the category of atma. So adi atmika is in specific reference to what we experience, the miseries we experience in relationship to the mind and body. Adi bautika means, bautic means other beasts or other entities. So going out here in Florida in particular, and probably many places in the summertime, you go out at sunrise or sunset and you get eaten alive by mosquitoes. That's a very good example of adi bautika. It's disturbance or misery, which is coming from another living entity, a blood-sucking living entity. And that's another category of misery that's coming from adibhotika. And there are other living entities that are very much in that category. And the last one is adidaivika. So those are the three categories: miseries which come from the mind or body, adhyatmika; miseries which come from other living entities, adibhotika; and adidaivika is in reference to the external, that which is controlled by the demigods, the weather, the heat, the rain, the snow, all these kind of external, what we would call natural incremental weather. That can be one way, the cyclones and tornadoes. And now we've just seen a horrible thing in the news, with the flash flooding and all those young children dying at a camp. They went to camp, and because of the flash floods, that's an example of adidaivika. That's suffering that's caused by external elements, the elements of deluge of rain. So those three categories, they cause miseries. The miseries are what causes our suffering and thus our disturbance. So a an advanced soul, a transcendentalist, does not experience the disturbance. In other words, their minds are controlled in such a way that they don't latch onto it. It's not like they don't experience a mosquito bite, that they're just not there. They may, but there's an element of tolerance. Just like previously in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says one of the principles of advancement: matra sparshas dukontia sitoshna sukadukada agama payano nityas tung titikshashva bharata. Tolerance. One must learn tolerance. There is heat and there is cold. We can't be bent out of shape by the heat. It's there, we tolerate. Or the cold, we tolerate. Um, uh, so all of the different dualities are there. The transcendentalist, or the advanced spiritualist, learns tolerance, how to tolerate. So therefore, they can not be disturbed. They can have a mind which is steady, a mind which is placid. Krishna described yoga previously, also in this chapter: samatvam, a mind that is steady, a mind that is stable, a mind that is equipoised, equanimity. All of these adjectives describe what the mind can be in that state of advancement. So Krishna described that characteristic: not being disturbed, free from attachment, fear, and anger, makes a sage steady in mind. We'll read a very wonderful verse, text 62. How do you develop attachments? By contemplating on something. So what does a transcendentalist do? It learns through the process of meditation and yoga and controlling the mind what to contemplate and what not to contemplate. I quoted William James, who was he was a psychologist and also a philosopher, and he said the beauty of the human mind is its ability to choose its thoughts, and that's exactly what a yogi understands. A yogi can develop a purified intelligence that can select where to go with the mind and where not to go with the mind. And when he does that, able to become free from attachment, because it's what we contemplate on which causes our attachment. Fear. There's many different types of fear: fear of death, fear of spiders. There's many different types of fear in this world. And basically that fear comes from the lack of understanding that we are not the body, that we are a soul, that if we think we are the all in all, our body and mind is the all in all of our existence, then quite naturally we will be fearful at the notion of death. Oh, I'm not going to exist anymore. Have you ever contemplated death and where you will be? And without knowledge, people think I will just cease to exist. And this is a frightening thought, a frightening experience, because we are immersed in consciousness, right? Everything that we are coming in contact with, the beauty of the world, everything that's pleasurable, everything that may be a bit of a disturbance is a factor. The factor is that we are conscious entities. So if we think that consciousness manifests as a result of the material body and mind complex, that combination of elements springs forth consciousness. So death is going to be a very frightening thought and therefore fear. But if we understand that consciousness emanates from the spiritual part of our existence, the Atma, the self, the soul, emanates consciousness. It's an energy, just like sun emanates sunshine. So when a person, through meditation and through yoga, begins to come to realize that consciousness is not sourced from the body, but it's sourced from the spirit soul, the Atma. When that's there, fear goes away. I've seen some of my friends, my dear, dear friends, who are also practitioners of Bhakti Yoga principle, when they passed away, do so in a totally aware and not fearful state of mind. So it can be, I've seen it, it can be experienced. And anger. Anger is the result of intense desire for oneself. And so anger can be controlled. And if it's not controlled, then it will be consuming, all consuming in that regard. So the transcendentalist who demonstrates they are free from attachment, fear, and anger, that is symptomatic of a sage, of a person with a steady mind and advanced in terms of their understanding. In the material world, this came from text 57, the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed. So just, let it flow. You've heard that statement probably used many times. Just let it flow. And basically that's what Krishna is saying here. Let it flow. It happens, good happens, evil happens. Let it flow. Pay it no mind. Remain fixed. Text 58 says, one who is able to withdraw their senses, this is an advanced soul, from the sense objects, to pull it in, to internalize. As a tortoise, using the metaphor of the tortoise, as a tortoise draws its limbs within the shell, is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. So Krishna is giving these different symptoms. A transcendentalist, in the next verse, Krishna gives another symptom. A transcendentalist doesn't have to suppress the senses in order to control them, but learn the process, through the process, particularly of Bhakti Yoga, through the process of utilizing the senses in service to the Supreme. That gives us an experience, a spiritual, devotional, loving experience in relationship to the Supreme, which is far greater than trying to suppress the senses, or even go with the senses trying to fulfill the demands of the senses. That experience of a pleasure which is higher, is of a higher category, then then the mind, you know, in a controlled state says, why do I want to do this? Why do I want to be subservient to my senses? Why not control my senses? And why not, in the process of controlling, try to please the Supreme? Try to act in such a way where it is an offering. What I'm doing is an offering. And then that experience, when the mind is diverted in that particular way, that higher experience of gratification that comes in service to the Supreme makes everything pale by comparison, and thus it becomes easy to control. Um, so then Krishna talks about how one becomes attached, and then the subsequent response when you don't become attached in a negative way. He says that what one contemplates on, what we fix our senses and thus our mind on, whatever we contemplate, that we become attached to it. And from that attachment, for instance, suppose you see a particular car and you may not be able to afford it, but you really like that car. Then my advice to you is don't go to a car dealership because when you have that kind of intensity of desire to have something, to possess something, then all good intelligence goes out the window. So contemplating the object of the senses develops attachment. From that attachment comes intense desire, Krishna says. From that intense desire, either we try to fulfill that desire. Let's say you really stretch it and you buy that new car, but you can't afford it. You drive the new car for a while and the new car becomes old. I mean, it becomes not new anymore, not novel anymore. So in that way, one can become frustrated from that intense desire and the attempt to fulfill that intense desire. There can be frustration, or it's not what it cracked up to be. One time I met Madonna and we had a nice little philosophical conversation, and I gave her a book about spirituality, and she immediately started reading it. And later on, she was quoted as saying, "Fame, it's not what it's cracked up to be." So I think some of the points I made and some of the points in that book really got to her because there's a lot of disturbance that goes on when you're famous. You have no privacy and a lot of disturbance. So you have that intense desire. The desire is not really fulfilling. I mean, you can experience something, but it may not be filling the heart with what the heart is really desiring. And that frustration develops, Krishna says, then, we kind of lose determination, memory gets lost. We really forget the goal of life. And when memory is lost, our intelligence is lost, and we can act in such a way that will continue or perpetuate our suffering. So Krishna explains that after he's talking about the control of the senses, and fixes them on the Supreme. And Krishna, actually, my teacher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, in his commentary, in order to exemplify that point, he talks about the story of Durvas Muni, who was a great, powerful yogi, and Ambarish Maharaj, who was a great, powerful devotee of God. And Durvas Muni was very easily pleased or displeased So he misunderstood a particular situation. He became angry at Ambarish Maharaj and tried to harm Ambarish Maharaj. And Ambarish Maharaj just was super tolerant and respectful to the sage, and he was protected from any harm by the Supreme Lord himself. So Durvas Muni had a lesson in that the sage, the king, who is not considered usually a saintly or a sage like sadhu, um, he behaved in such a way that was fulfillment of all these characteristics of a very advanced transcendentalist. So Duras Muni was taught a lesson. His anger only got him into more trouble, and eventually he had to apologize to Durvas Muni. So this is the power of controlling the senses. So, but after Krishna gives this whole psychological outline, attachment comes from contemplation of the objects of the senses, and so on and so forth. Krishna says, but if a person is freed from that attachment, controls what they contemplate on, and able to control the senses through certain lifestyle, certain principles that we incorporate within our lifestyle, then what happens? Then one can obtain mercy, grace from the Supreme Lord. And it's that grace that gives us strength, in incomparable strength, like Ambarish Maharaj exhibited, so that he was able to control himself, even in dire situation, even him being attacked by this powerful mystic yogi. He wasn't disturbed. So this is what Krishna says. This is another characteristic. So thus situated in this freedom that comes from control of the senses, a yogi becomes strong and pure in intelligence. Strength does not necessarily, in this regard, mean physical strength, although a yogi can be very physically strong. But in this particular regard, it means strong in their conviction, in their practice, in their sadhana. Strong as a result of consistency in their practice, their sadhana, there is purification of intelligence. The result of the purification of intelligence is tolerance. The threefold miseries that I discussed no longer exist. The adi-atmic, the adi-bhautic, the adi-daivik, they no longer become a factor or an issue. We're able to tolerate them. They are not disturbed. The yogi is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires and can achieve peace. And just the metaphor that Krishna uses in this regard is just like the ocean. The ocean remains undisturbed, even though there are so many rivers that flow into it. It remains undisturbed. So let me read a few of the verses of these philosophical points that I mentioned to show. So 60, the senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind, even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. So Krishna is giving Arjuna a warning that, even a person who is making the endeavor can fall prey to the strength of the senses and the mind. And then at 61, he says, one who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control, and fixes his consciousness upon me is known as a man of steady intelligence. So fixing, concentration, that's called dharana, on either the transcendental name of the Supreme, the form, the lila, the pastimes, or the guna, the qualities, thus fixing one's mind in meditation in that way then the intelligence becomes steady. 62 is that whole line, that psychological line that I was talking about, Krishna is revealing. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment, intense desire or lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. 63, from anger, complete delusion arises. In other words, we're taking the mirage as reality and reality as a mirage. So that is really what delusion means. We're not seeing things as they are. We're not seeing things clearly because of the attachment and the subsequent perspective that ensues as a result. So this is 63. From anger, complete delusion arises. And from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool or stays in the material, influenced by the material elements. And that's the opposite position of the transcendentalist or the spiritualist that Krishna is describing here. So the next one reads, as I spoke of the last explanation I gave, but a person free from all attachment and aversion and able to control his senses through regulative principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. It almost seems like an oxymoron, right? The regulative principles of freedom, because oftentimes people perceive controlled life regulation as more of a bondage rather than a freedom. Freedom is oftentimes misconstrued as just doing whatever I want, whenever I want. But that's not what Krishna is advising here. He's saying that by control, diet control, lifestyle control, regular practice of your yoga and through sadhana, that through these endeavors, then that is how we obtain freedom and thus peace of mind. Text 66 or 65, for one thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. In such satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is soon well established. So Krishna continually drives home this point of steadiness, intelligence being strong, established. Intelligence means the ability to discriminate between that which is beneficial for us, the ultimate beneficial. If you remember those two words I mentioned in previous lectures, Shreyas and Prayas. Shreyas means ultimate, and Prayas means immediate. So intelligence helps us to discriminate between actions which have ultimate benefit for us rather than just immediate gratification. So that is what intelligence, when Krishna says your intelligence is purified, your intelligence is strong. Here he's saying one's intelligence is established and steady. All of these indicate that strength, that ability to curtail any of the wildness of the mind, any of the lack of control of the mind. Text 66. One who is not connected with the Supreme. So what is that word? Ayuktasya. Yukta means connected. Ayuktasya, that you're not connected. Why are you not connected? Because if you're not connected, if you're not doing the things that Krishna recommends, control of the senses, purification of the intelligence, meditation, fixing the mind on the Supreme, if you're not doing those things, then you can neither have a spiritual intelligence nor a steady mind. The word that Patanjali uses in the Yoga Sutras is nibriti. Nibriti means the turning of the mind, means that this mind, uh, as described therein, means that which you focus your senses, those external objects that you focus your senses on, and then the subsequent um, response that you get from that focus. In other words, when I focus on an object of the sense, the response is the actual vision that goes back to my mind. So that response of the senses connecting with the outer world, the outer objects of the senses, that's a vritti, and we want to be on the platform of nivriti, where we're not controlled by the vritti or the turnings of those. We're actually able to sort them out and tolerate those that could potentially cause disturbance, and embrace those which are beneficial for us, ultimate beneficial, shreyas, ultimately beneficial for us. So then in text 66, no, I read that already. Oh, well, I'll read it again. One who is not connected, agyuktasya, with the Supreme, can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? So this is a good understanding. Happy mind comes through control of the senses, not necessarily just letting the senses run wild. Yeah. Text 67 as a strong, here's a little lesson for Arjuna from Krishna. As a strong wind sweeps away a boat on the water, even one of the roaming senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. So this is why Krishna is saying, how strong the senses are, that if you just see something which is causes distraction, then the intelligence will get lost, will get will float away, to use the boat analogy, and get. Did you ever catch yourself, just entertaining a thought that is not, the best for you? You catch yourself, right? You're there for a while, and then all of a sudden you go, oh my God, where was I? That kind of intelligence is required at all times, because Krishna says something that you hear can draw you away. Something that you see can draw you away. Something that you smell or taste can draw you away. So as a boat is swept by the wind on the water. Therefore, this is 668. Therefore, O mighty armed one whose senses are restrained from their objects is certainly of steady intelligence. Herein Krishna is reiterating the point of restraint, control. Please control. So you see, Krishna is giving. That's how you know an advanced soul. They're able to restrain themselves. They're able to, more often than not, have the intelligence make the proper choice rather than the mind make a fleeting or whimsical choice. Text 69. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled. So Krishna uses night. The word here is nisha, night, but it also means ignorance, one who is in ignorance or one who is in darkness. So where one may be, in a place or a situation where the senses can literally go crazy, that's considered the darkness, the intelligence is turned off, the mind is going and reeling and going from here to there. But in such a condition, the yogi, the highly advanced transcendentalist, that can be a time of awakening. That can be a time when they have the most profound realizations about the purpose of life. And as I said, it's not just about jnana, knowledge. It's about developing, cultivating vijnana, or realization, which can come from that knowledge. Text 70. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. We have just two more verses and we'll be finished. So let's go through them. And if there's further question, this is 71. A person who has given up all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, who has given up all sense of proprietorship and is devoid of false ego, he alone can attain real peace. So Krishna kind of reiterates certain points and introduces new points. The one thing he's saying is, devoid of false ego. He's mentioning that now. And he's also saying when it was given up sense of proprietorship, owner, this is mine. The false ego has two divisions. I am an identification. So if we're identifying that we are our male body or our female body or our Caucasian male body or our Asian female body, like that, if we are caught up in that kind of absorption, then the mind will not have the potency. The intelligence won't have the potency to actually make the mind peaceful and experience real peace. And the last verse of this second chapter, and I hope you appreciate the real wisdom of the Sankhya Yoga chapter, because it really is the foundation of the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. So let's read off this 72nd verse. That is the way of the spiritual and godly life, after attaining which a person is not bewildered. If one is thus situated, even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. And in the 8th chapter, Krishna further elaborates on that point. Very profound point about why we should be able to control our senses and our mind. Because Krishna says in the 8th chapter, where your thought is, where you place your mind at the time that you're leaving the body, you're passing away, where that thought is, that becomes like a director. It directs the mind to that destination. It creates the pathway, opens the portal to that destination. So what is Krishna saying here? What is Krishna elaborating on here again and again? That if you allow your mind to go here and there, then at the time of death, a very critical time where, things shut down, hearing shuts down, vision shuts down, smell shuts down, all the sensory inputs start fading away. And the very thing that is your sustenance, breath is your sustenance. Without breath, you'll go unconscious, and eventually you'll die. You won't exist. So this is the how profound, where you are focusing your mind at the time of death. what you've been practicing for. You know, a final, you have all these kinds of quizzes, right? During the course of your life. And then there's the final exam. Just like you're studying a subject matter and you have quizzes, and then there's the final exam. What do I do with my mind when everything starts shutting down? And Krishna says that is a key juncture in our existence. If we're able to control the mind and focus it like this yogi that Krishna has been describing with all of these various characteristics, if we're able to focus it on, meditate on the Supreme in the form we've discussed what that means, and Bhagavan, that means in the personal form of God, or the energetic form in the Brahman, or the form of the Supreme in the heart as Paramatma. Those are the yoga system's ultimate goal of controlling, to focus in on that. In bhakti, it's almost exclusively focusing on the beautiful form of the Supreme Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. And the process of bhakti creates a consistent interaction with that personality. And there's a relationship, loving relationships that develops. And love and how we act under love is such a powerful experience that it can help us to focus our consciousness at that critical hour, at that critical moment. And if we're there, if we're thinking of our lover, then that's the portal, that's the doorway that opens up, and that's the pathway that leads us to that destination. So yoga has a destination beyond just a nice body. And that's why we're studying this Bhagavad Gita. And this second chapter is the foundation of everything else that Krishna will say in the upcoming chapters. So I'll stop here. Thank you so much for your kind attention and your focus. And I'll open the floor to any kinds of questions, comments, realizations, observations that you may have had during the course of our class. So, anyone?
Yes, I have one.
Is that Trish there?
No, I'm Jai
You
Krishna.
have a question, Trish, or you just turned your camera on?
I do have a question, but Jaya is going
Your
to go
voice is
first.
not on.
I think Jaya is going to go first.
Your voice is still
Okay.
not on.
Can you hear me, Lakshmi?
Microphone.
Lakshmi, can you hear me?
No, not working?
Can you hear me?
I can
Alright.
hear you,
Shamamai, you have a question?
and I can hear him. He's asking, can you hear him?
You
I
can
think
also, if
Lakshmi
you
can't
have my
hear us.
son here, who is my manager, you say you can tap it into the chat. If for some reason the voice is not working, you can, if you have a question. Because I can't hear you, Trish.
Right.
Okay. Let me
Yeah,
see
I
if
think
Can't hear you now. Sorry. Something wrong.
kind attention. Anyone else?
Can you hear me?
Jai Krishna. Good to
I'm
see you
speaking.
also.
Hello,
Mi
Hare Krishna.
hermano. Muchas gracias.
Hare Krishna.
You know, it comes out. Why did you pull the plug? Jai Krishna. I hear somebody.
We hear you now.
Oh, you weren't hearing me?
No, I
The
wasn't.
whole
I don't,
the whole lecture?
no, we heard the lecture just now when
Just now. My son pulled the plug. I don't know why he pulled out the microphone right then. Because
Right.
okay. But you can
I
hear me
think
now.
it's working. Yeah, I think it's working now.
Oh, okay. Because you certainly are. You got
Yeah, okay. So
you had a
yeah,
question.
what I
Why
was
did
going to
you-
say is, that's interesting about giving up proprietorship because we work so hard at, achieving our goals and, making income for our families and creating a life and space. And it's hard not to take ownership.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what we're conditioned to do, right? Right from birth. You are what you achieve. You know,
Right.
and there's so much pressure on people. I had an experience. I did a lot of spiritual counseling in the course of my 52 years involved in bhakti. And I had this experience. It was very sad. In this young Indian man who he was accepted into a very good university, University of Pennsylvania, a very good university, and he had a lot of pressure on him, from his parents. You've got to make the family proud and all this pressure. And it's a very good university, and obviously it was very difficult for him. So he came to me for counseling, and he was very, very uptight, very anxious. I didn't really realize the full gamut of his anxiety, but long story short, he revealed everything. I tried to console him and tell him, it's not the end of the world. Number one, you can get, get an understanding, get a grip on your studies, or even if you have to go to another school, it's not the end of the world. But somehow or another, his mind had locked into it was the end of the world, and he committed suicide. And that's what I'm talking about when the thought process locks in and you can't see your way out of it. It's just like nothing's gonna work, nothing's gonna, and that's what happened to him. So it was unfortunate. I felt, badly that I couldn't do anything, but the steamrolling effect of that. I'm a failure. I'm letting my family down. I'm not doing well in my grades. That kind of built up such a momentum that unfortunately he couldn't do anything. He couldn't turn it off. So he did by ending his life, which is unfortunate.
That happened to one of my very close friends as well. He was an artist and he felt like he couldn't keep up with the ever-changing art world. And then he lost his job and he couldn't make a change. He couldn't make the transition. And he also committed suicide.
Yeah, that's why when we become philosophically strong in yoga, we're able to have a different perspective. One of the perspectives that I was, fortunate to learn is that that everything is a lesson for me. You know, it's not something against me to put me. It's actually for my benefit. I may not be able to see it at the time, whether it's a job loss or a relationship breakup, or may not be able to see something like that, or a diagnosis, a severe diagnosis. But ultimately, having that kind of steady intelligence that Krishna is talking about, that one develops as a result of, you know, performing sadhana and seeing things in light of the philosophical perspective, we can see it. And I know in my life, whatever has happened that could have thrown my life, you know, upside down and caused so much anxiety and distress, etc. Eventually, it just proved true that there was a lesson there for me, and if I got the lesson, then I was able to make a step forward in my life. I was able to progress in my life. So, yeah, I always say Krishna doesn't do things to me; he does things for me, and I'm thankful. I'm grateful. So,
Thank you for that.
any other question or comment?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, Jai Krishna, please.
Okay, I had a question carried over from last week, but towards the end of your lecture tonight, you prompted another question for me. So I'm going to go with
Okay.
this one because it's more fresh in my mind.
Okay.
So I've been led to believe, you know, through all my studies, that all our actions, all our behaviors, our past karma, and everything leads us to this present life and to the next life. But you said it close to the end of the of your lecture that whatever we think, you know, our thought process is going to take us through a portal to the next life. So doesn't it kind of negate all everything that I'm doing in this lifetime if I'm strong enough to think about Krishna at the end of my life, that it didn't matter what happened in this life?
Well, that's the power, that's the potency of fixing your consciousness on the Supreme. That is one thing that people are not aware of. Yeah, it is. But see, you can't outmaneuver God. It's not like you can just do what you want to do and then at the time you're going to fix your mind. It doesn't work that way. Everything that you are, everything that's happened to you, everything you've experienced is what has made you who you are today and why you are sitting here today, you know, in search of knowledge, in search of further clarity, everything. So, but if you are able to do it, if you are able to become that transcendentalist, that spiritualist, that's able to control the mind, the senses, purify the intelligence, and you are able to fix the mind at the end, because actually the process of bhakti is the path of grace. It's the path of mercy. And Krishna says in the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Tesham satatam yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam tadami buddhi yogatam yenamam upayantite. He says, if you are able to develop a sadhana, a practice in your life that is training your mind and your senses to connect with God, with the Supreme, then, and if you do that with all sincerity and all determination, then the amount of grace that flows in your direction is unlimited. So even it's said, you know, in the various scriptures and sacred texts and by the various sadhus, that even you may not even be on that level yet, but because your endeavor was so sincere and your effort was so great, then there's also an aspect of profound mercy. There is Nitya Siddha, a soul who is eternally liberated and never influenced by the material elements. There's a sadhana siddha, and it means that one who practices a sadhana, and by virtue of their consistent sadhana practice, they become purified, able to control the mind and fix the mind on the Supreme at the time of death. That's called sadhana siddha, the person who's liberated by virtue of the potency of their sadhana. And then there's kripa siddha, and kripa siddha means mercy. By the causeless or the profound mercy of either the pure soul who you've come in contact with, and that pure soul demonstrates or gives you a merciful ability, or coming directly from God himself, then you can become free, liberated, no matter what has happened in the past. So Nitya Siddha, eternally liberated. Sadhana Siddha, you become liberated through your practice of in bhakti, your chanting of japa, your performance of kirtan, swadhyaya, your study of sacred texts, your service, your seva attitude, service to other devotees, other people, other aspects of humanity. All of those things can lead you to the point of siddha, becoming liberated. Does that address your question?
Absolutely. Thank you, Prabhu.
You are welcome. Thank you. Anyone else have anything they would like to share with us? We are always eager to hear the realizations of other people, perspectives that you may have, questions that you may have, which will prompt an ever deepening understanding of the subject matter at hand.
I
No
have
one else?
some, yes,
Okay.
sure.
Go
I
ahead,
have some
Amy.
provocative things that may
Please.
potentially provocative. I'll start with
That's-
my. So
Go ahead.
I went for the past weekend. I went to the Great Smoky Mountains of Eastern Tennessee.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Made a
Love
pilgrimage to
it. Love it
Dollywood.
there.
Yeah. And the whole thing, spent some time with some dear old friends. And and then I do love Dolly Parton. And
She's great. She's a great
right. And so
person.
there's this great podcast, Dolly Parton's America, which was done during COVID times. It's a little older, but I finished all 9 episodes. The last episode is about her spirituality, which is very much a part of who she is, right? And she talks about it from her own perspective. And she says in this thing that she found God for herself when she was 12 in an abandoned church with a lot of, a deserted place where people go to hang out, a lot of graphic sexual pictures on the wall, an old piano, blah, blah, blah. And, she grew up very Pentecostal, but in that moment, she found a certain, peace with the divine, I'll call it. She said, I'm not a religious person, I'm a spiritual person. And I found my peace with that at age 12, and I've carried it with me through life. And I do basically everything that she had to say about that experience as who she is, Pentecostal, Eastern Tennessee, blah, blah, is very much in line with Vedic philosophy, although she probably wouldn't recognize it that way. She says, I take these things and I put them into action. I take my spirituality, my faith, and I act on them, which you can see that she does as a person, right? I think. Mm-hmm. Yep. And so then I think about, well, like, and other folks Like, I really wonder what you think of Krishnamurti, who says, forget all gurus, right? Forget all, like, there is no, meditation. There's no guru. There's your own personal practice, prayer, connection that you have as an individual with the divine, and in your own path, in your own way, whatever. So what do you make of that versus, years of study and meditation and whatever, like what do you I'm curious what you think about that.
Well, the first question, if I had the blessing of meeting him, I would have said, why did you put everything into books? There's books by Krishnamurti.
I don't have
You know,
all the
and
time, but like, yes, go ahead.
it's kinds of I've heard that he said that, and I just recently heard a lecture from him, espousing that perspective. But it seems to all, come back on him when you look at the fact that he's published books. So he's not actually. I'm wondering. I would like to ask him personally. Of course, he's deceased. So
Unfortunately.
why then why did you put out those books? You just kind of upending everything that you're saying about that. And the thing about it is, if you analyze those three types of liberated souls, you see, within the vast world of uniqueness and individuality, you see that there is room for every different paths. Truth is universal, no matter under what banner it flies. I mean, if you study the life of St. Francis of Assisi, for instance, who was hardcore Catholic monk, very austere, etc. But you analyze his teachings, you strip away the cultural colorings of religion, what Islam has in terms of its cultural influence, what Christianity or the Abrahamic religions of Catholicism and the various forms of Christianity and Judaism and its cultural influence. You strip it away and you come to the truths of what they're speaking. And you see there's so much similarity about what I'm saying from the Bhagavad Gita or what St. Francis will say. I will say I have read other sacred texts. I've never come across something so clearly defined, so detailed, the amount and extent of explanation that comes from books like Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam is just absolutely mind-boggling. And the whether you agree with it or not, to the letter, it just pieces it all together. So that's why I've kind of stayed put. I'm not really a religious, believer, adherent in that regard, but I am also interested in pure spirituality, and I've stayed put. And I've in interfaith dialogues that I've had, etc. I've challenged people. If you show me something more clearly defined and more in depth and a better path, I will happily go that way, that route. But to this day, I stay where I am because I feel like my life has been given purpose. The clarity of that purpose is very, crystal clear to me. And I feel like I have a shot at remembering God at the time of death because of it, because of the influence of the philosophy of Gita on my life and the implementation of that philosophy. So, Krishnamurti, I think And people like him out of India and other places kind of reacting. It was a reaction to corruption that had appeared in Vedic culture. I think Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is kind of like the guide of my lineage, he was also a bit of a rebel. And he made things really clear and simple, the path to achieve union or connection with God. He made it very clear. So that's what how I would answer Krishnamurti. I would think that for some people it really threw them off the path, and because then I know people say, well, anything can go and I can still advance. I know people who are Christian by faith have said the same thing. Oh, I can eat meat and I can drink liquor and I can do this and I can do that. All I need is Christ to save me. And I don't think that's exactly what Christ meant when he was, I don't think he meant that you can live any kind of lifestyle that you want to live as long as, Christ is your savior. I think so. That kind of license, I would say, can be misleading. I prefer to go the traveled path that there from the Mahabharata. It's Mahajana Yena Gata Sanpanta. It's a very famous verse that Prabhupada quotes, and that means just follow in the footsteps of the previous saints and sages, because that path has been traversed. So that's where I'm at in terms of my own the motivation for me as an individual who's practicing, making the attempt of seriously practicing the bhakti yoga path.
Thanks.
Thank you. I love provocation, so don't shy away if you have a
no, I know
question.
you. That's why I like to ask. But I could go on. Maybe I'll chat with you sometime offline, Lakshmi. I have.
You have a lot, right?
I don't think
Well,
Krishna actually said do whatever you want. I don't think that's what he said, and I don't think he's. Anyway.
I would love to. Just give me email.
Yeah.
And we could set up a time that we can discuss further.
Sure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, folks, for your attention and your participation. It's greatly appreciated. And I'm going to be on the road for a while. I really don't know if I'll have the facility until I actually get there. So keep your eye out for my messages. So keep your eye out for my messages. And if I'm able to do it, I will happily do it. If not, because I'm going to be in the mountains of West Virginia when we will arrive there on the 13th. So what day is the 13th? Does anyone have a calendar near them? Well, I'll be there on the 13th, so I'll be able to see what the facility is like and if I'm able to have privacy and good internet connection. So keep your eyes out for our next meeting, okay?
It's
Thank
a
you so much.
Sunday. It's a Sunday.
13th. Yeah, so I'll know by probably Monday whether I have, good internet connection and facility to do that. And I'll send out, like I normally do to you all, I send out a reminder. So it will be either a reminder that there is class or a cancellation or postponement of the class until I get it. I'll be there from the 13th to the 21st. And then I'll go to DC, I'll be at a friend's house, and certainly I'll have facility there. And then I go to another camp with my son, the second camp for him for the summer in Maryland, and I think that will have facility for me. So just keep your eyes out.
I
That's
will.
that's the short of it. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you very
You
much.
you all have a happy, healthy, and holy week until we see each
will.
other again. Okay.
Thank you. Safe journey.
Thank
Thank
Merry
you.
Christmas.